we basically treat therapy like a fire extinguisher. But think about it. It's this bright red canister sitting in the hallway, gathering dust, and, society dictates that you only ever smash the glass and grab it when the house is literally already burning down.
Right. Yeah, that is such a perfect way to frame it.
Right. But what if waiting for the fire is the exact reason our collective mental health is in such a precarious state?
So, welcome to the deep dive. You are joining us today for a session where our mission is to fundamentally dismantle this rock bottom myth of mental health care.
It is a massive myth, and we're looking at some truly fascinating literature today from coping and healing counseling.
Yeah, often referred to in the text as CHC. They're a telehealth practice based out of Georgia. And okay, let's unpack this because the core thesis here proposes a radical departure from how we normally operate. Instead of that fire extinguisher, they're suggesting we should treat therapy more like a daily vitamin or going to the gym.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how the literature establishes a really clear evidence-based argument. I mean, it basically says you do not need a diagnosis, and you certainly don't need a crisis to deserve support.
Which is wild because we have this pervasive cultural belief that mental health resources are exclusively reserved for acute emergencies.
Exactly. And the text points out that this belief is actually a massive psychological barrier. It actively keeps people from acquiring tools they could use today, simply because they're stuck in this mindset of, well, my life isn't falling apart, so I'm not bad enough yet.
The "I'm not bad enough yet" trap. That brings up a really interesting behavioral question for me. If people aren't rushing to put out a blazing fire, what actually drives them to seek out a professional?
That's the core question, isn't it? The text actually provides a whole list of what it considers highly valid, non-crisis reasons for starting therapy.
Yeah, and reading through it, I think you, listening right now, will probably recognize your own life in at least one of these scenarios. I know I did.
Oh, for sure. Same here. So the very first catalyst for growth they mention is, quote, feeling stuck in repetitive emotional patterns.
Yeah, and that concept of feeling stuck, it really warrants serious attention. Because it's not merely a passing mood, it's actually a profound neurological and psychological state.
Wait, really? Like hardwired?
Oh, absolutely. The mechanics of feeling stuck usually involve neural pathways and behavioral loops that a person has unconsciously reinforced over, years or even decades.
Oh, wow. So like what? Like relationship stuff?
Right, like
Yeah.
someone might find themselves having the exact same argument with their partner every single month. Or perhaps they consistently self-sabotage right before securing a major promotion at work.
Even though everything looks fine on the outside.
Exactly. They are not in a crisis. They're fully functional, paying their bills and seemingly thriving. But under the surface, there's this recurring glitch.
That's like a software glitch
Hmm.
where your brain just keeps, running an outdated script, regardless of the new input you give it.
That is a highly accurate way to conceptualize it. I mean, seeking therapy to break that repetitive pattern is about gaining an objective, trained outside perspective, because a professional can help you view the source code of that script.
Because you can't fix a behavioral loop if you literally can't see the parameters triggering it.
Right. Engaging in therapy at this stage is purely about proactive optimization.
Okay, so the text also emphasizes the desire to simply understand your own mind better and build proactive coping skills. But here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Oh.
Yeah, so looking at this list, the source explicitly highlights processing a life transition as a primary reason to begin therapy.
It does.
And it gives specific examples, like a new job, moving to a new city, having a new baby, an empty nest, or a divorce. Now, okay, divorce makes logical sense to most people.
Sure.
But a new job, a new baby, I mean, these are universally celebrated milestones. We throw massive parties for these events. So why do objectively good things require therapy? Aren't we supposed to just be happy about them?
You're highlighting the exact paradox the source is asking us to reconsider. Any major life transition, regardless of whether society labels it as a positive or negative event, acts as a severe inflection point.
An inflection point.
Yeah, it fundamentally shifts your emotional and cognitive baseline. I mean, think about the underlying mechanics of bringing a new baby home or accepting a massive promotion.
Totally overwhelming.
Because your fundamental identity is shifting. The daily routines you relied on for stability are just completely dismantled and rebuilt. The expectations placed upon you change overnight.
So even if you are like ecstatic about the baby or the new corner office,
Yeah.
your brain is still in absolute overdrive trying to adapt to this alien reality.
Correct. And the psychological term for this is actually eustress, meaning positive stress.
Eustress, okay.
But your nervous system does not neatly differentiate between the physiological arousal of eustress and distress. It just registers a massive cognitive load.
Wow, okay. That actually makes a lot of sense.
And the text uses a deeply relatable phrase here. It notes that people frequently seek proactive therapy during these times because they, quote, just want to feel more like yourself again.
Just want to feel more like yourself again. That is so validating.
It is. Because when you go through a major transition, you lose your center of gravity. Proactive therapy provides the structural scaffolding necessary to, integrate this new reality without losing your sense of self.
So it's a standalone, perfectly valid reason for seeking help, just ensuring you emerge stabilized rather than completely depleted.
Exactly.
Okay, so if proactive therapy is so effective for the individual going through transitions, I'm wondering, how does this ripple out? Like, if we have a society or a workplace filled with people doing this work, what happens?
Well, the source material addresses employers and HR leaders directly on this point, moving from the individual out to the collective.
So what does this all mean for a company's bottom line or, a community's overall vibe?
It essentially represents a paradigm shift, moving from corporate damage control to what the text effectively frames as structural wellness.
Structural wellness.
Right, because if an organization operates under the rock bottom myth, employees only utilize mental health benefits when they are entirely burned out, like taking medical leave or experiencing an acute crisis.
Which is totally reactive management.
Yes. The source argues that normalizing therapy as a tool for routine growth meaningfully changes utilization rates across the board, and it fundamentally destigmatizes help-seeking behavior.
Meaning people don't feel like they have to hide the fact that they have a 2 p.m. therapy appointment.
Precisely. And the text anchors this in 3 distinct outcomes for organizations. When people are relieved of the burden of waiting for a breaking point, 1, they stay healthier, 2, they perform better at work, and 3, they maintain more stable relationships.
Wow. I mean, performance improving makes perfect sense if we think about the software glitch analogy from earlier.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you aren't wasting mental energy fighting the same outdated scripts every day, you have vastly more cognitive bandwidth available for your actual work.
That's the mechanics of it, yeah.
It's the difference between retrofitting a building after an earthquake versus, engineering the foundation to safely sway with the tremors in the first place.
That structural engineering metaphor is perfectly aligned with the literature. The systemic ripple effect of proactive care is just a more resilient, adaptable community.
Right. But okay, let's be incredibly real for a second.
Let's do it.
Because analyzing the theory of structural wellness is great. But the philosophy of proactive, stigma-free therapy, it's intellectually sound, but it remains a complete fantasy if people can't actually access or afford the care.
That is the big hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, it feels a bit like telling someone they need to eat a purely organic diet when they live in a geographic food desert and are living paycheck to paycheck. If the gym is a 3-hour drive away and costs $1,000 a month, nobody is lifting those weights.
No, of course not.
So how does a practice actually execute this proactive model in the real world, like logistically?
This is where the source material transitions into practical logistics, and they use coping and healing counseling, or CHC, as the ultimate case study in access.
Okay, let's look at those specific details then.
Yeah, the text outlines exactly how CHC dismantles the geographic, cultural, and financial barriers that typically lock people out of the system.
So breaking down the barriers, look at the geographic barrier first. The text states that CHC serves all 159 counties in Georgia.
Which is massive.
Right. Not just the affluent suburbs of Atlanta, but literally every single county. And the mechanism they use to achieve this is a 100% IPA-compliant telehealth model.
Which is a game changer for access.
To someone outside the medical field, telehealth might just sound like hopping on a FaceTime call. But it fundamentally changes the friction of getting help, doesn't it?
It drastically alters the behavioral economics of healthcare. I mean, when we talk about friction, we are talking about the obstacles that prevent an action.
Like having to commute.
Exactly. In rural counties, the nearest specialist might be a 2-hour drive away. That turns a simple daily vitamin check-in into an exhausting full-day logistical nightmare.
Which means no one is going to do it.
Right. A telehealth model removes that friction entirely. You can engage in therapy from your living room or during your lunch break.
And the HIPAA compliance part is specifically mentioned in the text.
And it's crucial because it guarantees privacy and security, which creates the psychological safety required for a patient to open up in their own environment.
But access isn't just about a secure video link. It's about who is sitting on the other side of that screen.
Very true.
The source details that CHC employs a diverse, culturally competent team of over 15 licensed therapists. And the text provides an alphabet soup of acronyms here.
It does get a bit technical there.
Yeah, it lists LCSWs, LPCs, and LMFTs. And to the layperson, a therapist is a therapist. Why does a single practice need such a specific, varied mix of licenses?
Because human distress is multifaceted, and different licenses represent entirely different frameworks for problem solving.
Oh, interesting. So what do they all mean?
Well, an LMFT, which stands for Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, views a patient's struggles through the lens of relational dynamics and family systems.
Okay, makes sense.
Then an LPC, or Licensed Professional Counselor, typically focuses heavily on individual cognitive processes and mental health conditions.
So that's more the individual internal stuff.
Right. And then an LCSW, a Licensed Clinical Social Worker, brings a systemic perspective, evaluating how a person's environment, their community, and social resources impact their psychology.
Oh, wow. I never realized there was such a difference.
Yeah, a clinic requires all these specialized frameworks because a patient is simultaneously an individual, a member of a family, and a participant in a broader society.
But that actually makes the scope of their services much clearer because the text notes, they handle everything from individual and couples therapy to teen therapy, specifically ages 13 and up, and even life coaching.
It's a very comprehensive umbrella.
Yeah, and the specialties range from anxiety, depression and trauma or PTSD, to grief, relationships, and general stress. But I want to go back to something the text emphasizes. It says this diverse team is culturally competent.
Yes, that's a huge point.
Why is cultural competence highlighted as a clinical necessity rather than just, a corporate buzzword?
Well, if the goal of non-crisis therapy is to deeply understand your own mind, as we discussed earlier, that mind does not exist in a vacuum. It is shaped by a specific cultural context.
Right, background matters.
Completely. Cultural competence means the therapist understands the societal norms, values, and systemic pressures unique to your background.
Give me an example of how that plays out.
So, if a patient comes from a culture that heavily prioritizes family collectivism over individualism, right?
Yeah.
A therapist utilizing a purely Western individualistic framework might push boundaries that actually cause harm.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so having a diverse team of 15-plus professionals ensures that a patient can find a guide who inherently understands the cultural water they are swimming in. You must feel seen and understood before you can be effectively helped.
Okay, so we have solved the geographic friction,
Mhm.
and we've solved the cultural and clinical alignment. But I have to push back on the absolute elephant in the room here.
Let me guess.
Cost.
Yes, the cost. Because even with telehealth and a great therapist, proactive care is notoriously expensive. Isn't this kind of self-exploration still just a luxury for the wealthy?
That is the most common and, frankly, most valid criticism of the mental health industry as a whole.
Right.
However, the financial data provided in the source material regarding CHC's specific model
Right.
actually actively refutes that limitation.
I found the financial breakdown in the text genuinely surprising, to be honest.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it notes that for Medicaid patients, the copay is literally $0.
And for major commercial insurances, they explicitly list Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana. The copay ranges from merely $10 to $40 a session.
Which is how they dismantle the barrier. By accepting Medicaid with a $0 copay and structuring commercial insurance copays between $10 and $40, the practice is aggressively dismantling the economic wall.
The wall that historically separates working-class populations from preventive care.
Exactly. Because healthcare economics usually dictate that only those with high disposable income can afford to treat therapy as a growth tool.
Rather than a last resort.
Right. But when a session costs the equivalent of a few coffees or absolutely nothing at all, taking that proactive step to process a transition or strengthen a marriage becomes a highly realistic, sustainable option for the average person.
It turns the daily vitamin theory into an actual executable reality.
It really does.
The source material is essentially a blueprint for how a practice can align its operational logistics with its clinical philosophy. I mean, the text even lists their specific contact info right alongside these clinical outcomes.
Oh, yes. I think referrals are welcome at 404-832-0102 or through checktherapy.com and support at cheektherapy.com.
And including those details in the text isn't just administrative, right? It proves the central thesis of the literature. Lowering the barrier to entry requires making that very first step as entirely frictionless as possible for the patient.
It bridges the massive gap between intellectually understanding the importance of proactive care and actually initiating it.
Because it's easy to say go to therapy, but hard to actually make it happen.
Exactly. The entire case study of the CHC model, the statewide telehealth reach, the diverse licenses, the cultural competence, and the accessible pricing, it's architected to facilitate the exact paradigm shift we've been analyzing. They remove the friction so the patient can focus entirely on the growth.
Okay, as we synthesize the core takeaways from today's deep dive, I think the most vital truth extracted from this literature is a reframing of your own worthiness.
I love that.
You listening right now, you do not need a clinical diagnosis to justify seeking support. You do not need to hit rock bottom or wait until your life is actively falling apart to deserve a trained guide.
The outcomes are actually strongest when engagement is preventative.
Right. The healthiest approach to mental wellness involves navigating life transitions, processing positive stressors, and doing relationship work long before the tension becomes unbearable. The absolute best time to start therapy is before you feel like you have to.
The transition from crisis management to proactive growth is transformative. And not just for the individuals seeking equilibrium, but for the organizations and the communities they inhabit.
Transformative is the perfect word. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent a lot of time discussing the idea from the text that people engage in proactive therapy because they just want to feel more like yourself again, especially when navigating a massive transition like a new job or a baby.
Right, getting back to baseline.
But consider this. What if engaging in non-crisis therapy doesn't just return you to the person you used to be?
Oh, interesting.
What if the profound secret of proactive mental health care is that it introduces you to a more resilient, self-aware, and evolved version of yourself that you haven't even met yet? What if you aren't just learning how to put out a fire paces? What if you're finally learning how to build a fireproof house?
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the journey, because the goal of growth is never regression to an old baseline. It is the establishment of a fundamentally stronger one.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We appreciate your curiosity and, your willingness to explore the mechanics behind these ideas with us. Keep questioning your baselines, keep growing, and remember, you do not have to wait for an emergency to prioritize your own mind. We will catch you on the next one.